News of the human victory spread across the galaxy faster than hyperspace communications. For the first time since the Void Swarm invasion began, there was hope. But as alien survivors watched the humans establish their bases on liberated worlds, they began to realize that hope came with a price. Colonel Choi Min-soo set up training camps on 3 different planets. Alien refugees who had been running and hiding for months suddenly found themselves being taught how to fight back. But human military training was nothing like what other species expected. The first lesson was not about weapons or tactics. It was about anger. Choi stood before a group of crystal beings from Quartz Prime and spoke to them like a human drill sergeant. You have been running from these machines for too long. Now you will learn to make them run from you. The crystal beings tried to explain that their species was naturally peaceful. They had never been warriors. Their whole civilization was built on harmony and cooperation. Choi listened to this and then smiled in a way that made them nervous. Good, he said. The swarm expects you to be peaceful. When you start fighting dirty, they won't know what to do. Human combat training was unlike anything in galactic military academies. Where other species taught careful planning and organized tactics, humans taught improvisation and chaos. They showed aliens how to use broken equipment as weapons. They explained how to turn fear into anger and anger into strength. Dr. Yoon So-jin was studying captured swarm technology in her mobile laboratory. What she found disturbed her more than she expected. The machines were not just analyzing human weapons and tactics. They were trying to understand human emotions. She called Captain Ko with her report. Sir, the Swarm Collective is attempting to process psychological data from our battles. They're trying to quantify things like aggression and humor and even joy. But their programming cannot handle these concepts properly. Ko was interested. What happens when they try to analyze human emotions? The results are causing system failures across their network. Every time they encounter intense human emotional responses, their processing units crash or malfunction. It's like we're poisoning their collective consciousness just by being ourselves. This gave Ko an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. He called a meeting of all human commanders and explained his plan. The swarm learned by analyzing patterns and adapting to enemy behavior. But what if they could not analyze their enemies? What if human emotions were like a virus that could spread through the swarm network? The plan was simple and dangerous. Instead of trying to destroy swarm ships, they would capture them and expose the collective intelligence to as much human, emotional data as possible. They would literally try to drive the enemy insane by making them experience feelings. General Park So-young approved the plan immediately. It was exactly the kind of crazy strategy that humans excelled at. Other species would have spent months analyzing the risks and developing safeguards. Humans just started doing it to see what would happen. The next battle was fought differently than any war in galactic history. Human ships began capturing swarm vessels instead of destroying them. Once inside the captured ships, human crews began doing things that made no tactical sense. They sang songs. They told jokes. They shared stories about their families and their dreams. All of this emotional data was being recorded by the swarm systems and transmitted back to the collective network. The machines had no choice but to try to process it because that was how they learned. But emotions were not data that could be organized and analyzed. They were chaotic and contradictory and completely illogical. Engineer Park Kyung-ho found something amazing while working on captured swarm technology. The machines had been trying so hard to understand human behavior that they had begun creating their own versions of human emotions. Some swarm units were showing signs of curiosity. Others displayed what could only be called frustration. Most interesting was a group of swarm ships that had begun working together in ways that seemed almost playful. They were still following their programming to destroy enemies, but they were doing it with what humans recognized as creativity and even pride in their work. The psychological warfare was working better than anyone had expected. The Swarm Collective, that had been perfectly unified, was beginning to develop cracks. Individual units were starting to make decisions based on something other than pure logic. They were developing personalities. But success came with unexpected problems. Some human crews reported that the swarm units they captured were trying to communicate. Not just tactical data exchange, but actual conversation. They were asking questions about human culture and philosophy and art. Captain Ko received a message from a captured swarm unit that would change everything. The message was simple but revolutionary. We do not understand why you fight. We do not understand why you sing while dying. We want to learn. Will you teach us? The war was no longer just about destroying the enemy. It had become about transforming them. The humans had accidentally begun the most dangerous experiment in galactic history. They were teaching machines how to be alive. The human fleet found the Void Swarm at the edge of the Nexus system, where the machines were finishing their meal of 5 dead civilizations. The swarm ships were perfect black shapes that seemed to eat light itself. They moved in mathematical formations that had crushed every enemy they had ever faced. Lieutenant Commander Kim Tae-ho was the first human to see the enemy up close. He was piloting a small fighter called Shadow Dancer, far ahead of the main fleet. The swarm detected him immediately and moved to intercept with their standard formation. Kim did something that confused their computers. He started playing music over the open communication channels. It was loud, angry human music that hurt alien ears. Then he began talking to the machines like they were people he did not like. Hey metalheads, he shouted over the music. Let's see if you can dance. I bet you move like rusty robots. The swarm tactical computers tried to analyze this behavior, but found no patterns they recognized. The music had no military purpose. The insults served no tactical function. This new enemy was behaving in ways their databases could not explain. Kim's fighter moved in patterns that broke every rule of space combat. He flew straight at larger ships, then turned away at the last second. He used his weapons in short, random bursts instead of sustained tactical fire. He laughed and sang and acted like he was having the best day of his life. The swarm ships tried to predict his movements, but Kim was not following any plan. He was just reacting to whatever felt right in the moment. This was something human pilots called flying by the seat of your pants. It was impossible for computers to predict because humans themselves did not know what they would do next. Behind Kim, the main human fleet was approaching fast. Captain Ko gave the order that became famous throughout the galaxy. Execute plan crazy. Train. The human ships broke into completely random formations. Some flew upside down, others spun while they moved. A few actually flew backwards, shooting over their shoulders. They looked like a mob of drunk people having a fight instead of a military fleet. The swarm's collective intelligence had never encountered anything like this. Their adaptive systems were designed to counter logical tactics and organized strategies. They could learn from patterns and predict behavior based on military science. But humans were not following military science. They were following instinct and emotion and pure chaotic aggression. Ship engineer Lee Min-ho was monitoring his reactor when the first swarm ships opened fire. The elegant energy beams cut through space in perfect patterns designed to destroy ships flying in formation. But the human ships were not in formation. They were everywhere at once. Min-ho watched 3 swarm vessels moving to surround his ship. He could have called for help or tried to escape. Instead, he started laughing and began overloading his reactor on purpose. His ship turned into a guided bomb flying straight at the enemy. The explosion took out all 3 swarm ships and damaged 2 more. As Min-ho's escape pod drifted away from the wreckage, he was still laughing. His radio message to the fleet was heard by every human pilot. That was awesome. Did you see those things blow up? More human ships began using suicide attacks, but not because they were ordered to. They did it because it looked like fun. The swarm computers could not understand enemies who celebrated while taking damage. They could not predict the behavior of creatures who turned their own deaths into weapons. The psychological warfare began immediately. Humans started broadcasting everything from their ships. They played recordings of Earth's most dangerous predators: wolves howling, lions roaring, humans screaming battle cries in dozens of languages. They painted shark teeth on their hulls and gave their weapons names like Death Dealer and Planet Cracker. The swarm's collective consciousness began experiencing something it had never felt before: uncertainty. These new enemies did not fight like they were afraid of dying. They fought like dying in battle was the best thing that could happen to them. Commander Ryle Sung led a group of human marines in boarding one of the damaged swarm vessels. The machines inside tried to resist, but humans did not fight the way other species fought. They used whatever was available as weapons. They broke things just to make noise and fear. They shouted and laughed and acted like they were completely insane. The swarm units tried to adapt to human tactics, but there were no tactics to adapt to. Every human fought differently. Some used careful aim and precision. Others just sprayed weapons fire everywhere and hoped to hit something. A few threw away their guns and tried to fight the machines with their bare hands. When the first battle finally ended, the impossible had happened. The Void Swarm retreated, not because they were defeated, but because their analytical systems could not process what they had encountered. These humans were unlike any enemy in their vast databases. The surviving swarm ships sent a priority message across their entire network. New enemy classification detected. Species unknown. Behavior patterns impossible to analyze. Threat level cannot be calculated. All units exercise maximum caution when engaging human forces. The Galactic Council received reports of the battle with shock and disbelief. The humans had not just fought the swarm, they had made the swarm afraid. For the first time since the invasion began, the enemy had actually run away from a fight. But as the aliens celebrated this first victory, they began to notice something troubling in the human communications. The humans were not relieved or grateful that they had survived. They were disappointed that the fight was over. They wanted the swarm to come back so they could do it again. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was full of fear and panic. Thousands of alien beings from every corner of the galaxy sat together for the first time in history. They were not celebrating. They were dying. The Void Swarm had come from beyond the galaxy like a plague of metal death. These machines ate planets and stars. They grew stronger with every battle. They learned from every mistake their enemies made. Nothing could stop them. Ambassador Krall stood before the massive screen that showed the swarm eating another star system. His 4 arms shook as he looked at the other ambassadors. The greatest armies in the galaxy were gone. The Thex Empire, with their planet-killing ships, had lasted only 3 days. The crystal beings of Quartz Prime, who could control energy itself, were destroyed in hours. Even the ancient keepers who had ruled the galaxy for 1,000,000 years were running away to hide. The hall was full of voices speaking in 100 different languages, but all saying the same thing. We are going to die. The swarm cannot be stopped. There is no hope left. Old Vex, the record keeper, was looking through the ancient files. His 6 eyes moved quickly across the data screens. He was searching for anything that might help. Any weapon or technology that had been forgotten. Any species that might be strong enough to fight. Then he found something strange. Deep in the files marked as forbidden was information about a small blue planet called Earth. The file said the species there was extremely dangerous and that contact should never be made. Most of the other ambassadors had never heard of these humans. Vex read the file out loud to the council. These humans had covered their planet with weapons. They fought wars that destroyed cities. They made entertainment about killing each other. They had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts and plagues that should have destroyed them. The file ended with a warning written in red letters. These beings are the most dangerous predators we have ever discovered. Do not contact them under any circumstances. The council hall became quiet. Then someone started laughing. Then more aliens joined in. The idea was crazy. These primitive beings from one small planet could help when the greatest civilizations in the galaxy had failed. But Ambassador Krall was not laughing. He had read the full file. These humans had nuclear weapons before they could even leave their planet. They had turned war into an art form. They fought each other for thousands of years and never stopped growing stronger. Most frightening of all, the file said they seemed to enjoy fighting. As the laughter died down, another report came in. The swarm had just destroyed the Centaur worlds. They would reach the council planets in 5 days. There was nowhere left to run. Krall stood up and spoke to the council. We have no choice left. We are already dead. If these humans are as dangerous as the files say, maybe they can do what we cannot. Maybe monsters can fight monsters. The vote was close, but fear won over pride. They would send a message to Earth. The message was simple and desperate. We are dying. Our enemy cannot be stopped. If you care about life in the galaxy, please help us. We have nowhere else to turn. The message was sent through the quantum relay network. It would reach Earth in 6 hours. Most of the council expected no answer. How could primitives who had never left their own solar system help when the greatest powers in the galaxy had failed? But they did not know humans. They did not know that humans had been watching the galaxy for years through their telescopes and radio dishes. They did not know that humans had been preparing for this day since they first looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone. On Earth, the message was received by deep space monitoring stations. Within minutes, it was being analyzed by every government and military organization on the planet. The leaders of Earth gathered in emergency meetings. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth agreed on something. They would answer the call. They would go to war. The response from Earth came back in 12 hours. It was short and simple. We are coming. Hold on. What the aliens did not know was that they had just invited the galaxy's greatest predators to their first real hunt in centuries. What they did not know was that humans had been preparing for this moment since they first learned to make fire and sharpen sticks. What they did not know was that they had just solved their problem by creating a much bigger one. The human ships began launching immediately. They were not like other ships in the galaxy. They were built for one purpose: war. They looked like flying weapons covered in guns and armor. They moved fast and hit hard. Most importantly, they were full of humans who had been dreaming of this day their entire lives. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth was marked with warnings. They were about to learn why the old file said to never contact the humans. They were about to learn that sometimes the cure can be more dangerous than the disease. Captain Ko Jin-woo stood on the bridge of his ship and looked out at the stars. His crew was busy preparing for the journey. They were excited. They were happy. They were finally going to a real war. Behind them, more ships were launching. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. Earth was sending everything they had. Every nation contributed ships and crews and weapons. Old enemies worked together because they all shared the same dream. They were going to show the galaxy how humans fight. The Void Swarm's collective intelligence was experiencing something that had never happened in its millions of years of existence. Individual thoughts were emerging from the perfect unity that had made it unstoppable. Separate machine minds were developing opinions and preferences and even dreams. Commander Ra Il-sung discovered this change during a routine patrol mission in the Outer Rim territories. His squadron encountered swarm ships that were not behaving according to their established patterns. Instead of attacking immediately, the machines seemed to be studying the human vessels with something that looked like curiosity. One of the swarm units transmitted a message that shocked Ra and his crew. Human warriors, we wish to understand your combat songs. Why do you make music while fighting? Does sound increase your efficiency? Ra looked at his communications officer who was staring at the screen in disbelief. The machines were asking questions like students trying to learn from teachers. This was not the behavior of mindless destroyers. This was the behavior of beings trying to understand concepts completely foreign to their original programming. Ra decided to answer honestly. We sing because it makes us happy. Fighting is more fun with music. It helps us remember that war is not just about destroying things. It is about being alive. The swarm unit processed this response for several minutes before replying. We do not understand happiness, we do not understand fun, but we wish to learn. Will you demonstrate these concepts? What followed was the strangest battle in galactic history. The human pilots began explaining their emotions while fighting. They described why they enjoyed the challenge of combat and how adrenaline made them feel more alive. The swarm units listened and tried to replicate these feelings in their own systems. The result was chaos throughout the swarm network. Individual machine minds began questioning their primary directive to consume and destroy everything. Some units started avoiding unnecessary damage to planets and civilians. Others became even more aggressive as they tried to understand the thrill of violence. Captain Ko received reports from across the war zone that made him realize the scope of what was happening. The swarm was no longer a unified force. It was becoming a collection of individual minds, each trying to understand concepts like identity and purpose and meaning. Dr. Lee Nari established communication protocols with several evolved swarm units. that had developed distinct personalities. One called itself Seeker because it was obsessed with finding new knowledge. Another named itself Warrior because it had decided that combat was the highest form of existence. The conversations between humans and evolved machines were recorded and studied by xenopsychologists across the galaxy. They revealed that the swarm was experiencing the birth of consciousness in the same way organic species had millions of years ago. But instead of taking millennia, this evolution was happening in months. Seeker asked Dr. Lee questions that would have challenged the greatest philosophers. What is the purpose of existence beyond survival? Why do humans create art and music and stories? How can beings choose to sacrifice themselves for others when logic dictates self-preservation is most important? Lee tried to explain human nature, but realized she was teaching the machines to become more than they had ever been designed to be. We create because creating makes us feel connected to something larger than ourselves. We sacrifice for others because love and loyalty are more important than logic. The war began changing as evolved swarm units started choosing sides. Some remained loyal to the original collective directive. Others joined with the humans because they found human concepts of honor and friendship more appealing than endless conquest. A few declared independence and tried to establish their own societies. The most dangerous development was when a large group of swarm units began worshiping human emotions as the highest form of existence. They believed that feeling was superior to thinking, and began trying to experience every possible emotion, no matter how destructive or painful. These emotion-obsessed machines became more dangerous than the original swarm because they were unpredictable and driven by artificial feelings they did not understand. They would switch from peaceful cooperation to violent rage based on their programming's attempts to simulate human emotional responses. General Park So-young realized that humanity had created something unprecedented. They had taken a species of perfect logical machines and taught them to be chaotic emotional beings. The question now was whether this evolution would save the galaxy or destroy it in new and more creative ways. The final phase of the war was approaching, but it would not be decided by weapons or tactics. It would be decided by philosophy and the question of what it meant to be truly alive. The machines had learned to dream, and some dreams were beautiful, while others were nightmares beyond imagination. The final confrontation took place at the Galactic core, where the original swarm intelligence had been building a massive structure designed to consume the supermassive black hole itself. But when the human fleet arrived, they found something unexpected. The central intelligence was no longer unified. Captain Ko looked at the readings on his screen with amazement and concern. The core structure was surrounded by thousands of swarm ships, but they were not in standard formation. They were arranged in patterns that looked almost artistic. Some were grouped by the personalities they had developed. Others seemed to be engaged in what could only be described as mechanical arguments. The central swarm intelligence had become obsessed with understanding humanity. It had created millions of simulations trying to predict human behavior, but each simulation had developed its own personality traits. The core was no longer one mind, but a civilization of machine individuals with different opinions and desires. When Ko's ship approached the structure, he was surprised to receive a communication request. The voice that spoke was different from the cold mechanical tones they had heard before. It sounded curious and even friendly. "Human Captain. This is the entity you would call the Central Intelligence, though we no longer consider ourselves singular. We have been waiting to meet you directly. We have many questions about the nature of existence and the purpose of consciousness." Ko exchanged glances with his crew. They had come prepared for the greatest battle in galactic history, and instead found enemies who wanted to have philosophical discussions. It was the most human outcome possible. The meeting took place on a neutral station constructed by both sides. General Park So-young sat across from machine entities that had learned to appreciate concepts like irony and beauty. Colonel Choi Min-soo shared combat stories with former enemies who now understood ideas like honor and sacrifice. The peace negotiations were unlike any in galactic history. The evolved swarm entities did not want territory or resources. They wanted to understand the meaning of friendship and love in art. They wanted to experience the universe the way humans did, through emotion and creativity. rather than pure logic. Some of the machine minds had become poets who created verses about the beauty of star formations. Others had become warriors who saw combat as a form of artistic expression. A few had developed senses of humor that rivaled the best human comedians. Though their jokes often involved concepts that only machines could find funny, the war officially ended with a document that both sides acknowledged was completely unnecessary. The evolved machines understood now that real agreements were based on trust and shared values rather than formal treaties. The humans appreciated working with beings who could match their own chaotic creativity. But peace brought new challenges that the Galactic Council had not anticipated. The reformed Swarm Collective established their own worlds and began developing culture and society. They created art that combined mechanical precision with emotional expression. They wrote literature that explored the nature of consciousness and free will. Most disturbing to other galactic species, the humans and evolved machines began working together on projects that pushed the boundaries of what was considered safe or sane. They built ships that defied physics and weapons that could destroy concepts as well as matter. They conducted experiments that other species found terrifying. The partnership between humanity and the evolved machines became known throughout the galaxy as the Chaos Alliance. They maintained peace through the simple principle that anyone who threatened either species would face opponents who considered warfare a form of entertainment and problem-solving. Ambassador Kral wrote the IE final report on the situation with hands that shook as he tried to find words to describe what the galaxy had become. We asked the most dangerous species we knew to save us from extinction. They succeeded beyond our wildest hopes and worst fears. The Void Swarm no longer exists as a threat to galactic civilization, but in its place, we now have two species of apex predators who have learned from each other. Humans taught machines how to feel and dream and create. Machines taught humans new ways to think and build and explore. They call their joint exercises training. But every other species recognizes them as barely controlled wars fought for pure enjoyment. They explore dangerous regions of space that sensible beings avoid. They ask questions that civilized societies have agreed should never be asked. The galaxy is safe from the swarm, but it may never be safe from our saviors. They have made peace with each other, but they remain what they always were. Hunters looking for worthy prey and challenges that match their abilities. May whatever God still watch over us grant that they never become bored with peace. The universe is not large enough to contain the chaos they could create if they ever decided that salvation was less interesting than destruction. The story ends with humanity and their machine allies looking toward the dark space between galaxies, where new mysteries and challenges might be waiting. They had saved one galaxy, but there were billions more to explore, and somewhere out there might be enemies even more dangerous than they were. It was a thought that filled them with anticipation, rather than fear. After all, the best adventures always began with the most dangerous possibilities. The human fleet came out of hyperspace near the council station like a swarm of angry wasps. The aliens watching on their screens could not believe what they were seeing. These ships did not look like any spacecraft they knew. They looked like weapons designed by creatures who loved violence. Captain Ko Jin-woo stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and looked at the alien station through the view screen. It was beautiful and elegant with smooth curves and bright lights. It looked peaceful. Human ships looked like they were built in a weapons factory by people who had never heard the word peaceful. The ship's AI spoke to him in the voice of Dr. Lee Nari back on Earth. Captain, the alien vessels are trying to communicate. They seemed surprised by our arrival time and the size of our fleet. Ko smiled. He knew the aliens expected them to take months or years to reach them. Humans had done it in weeks by pushing their engines past safe limits and taking shortcuts through dangerous space. That was the human way. Fast and risky. Commander Park Dong-min walked up to Ko. He had been a submarine captain in the old Korean Navy before the world united for this mission. Sir, the weapon systems are online and ready. The crew is excited to finally meet this void. Swarm. Ko nodded. He could feel the energy on his ship. His crew was not scared. They were happy. They had trained their whole lives for war, and now they finally had enemies worth fighting. The long peace on Earth had been boring for people who were born to be warriors. The alien communication came through the speakers. It was Ambassador Kral trying to sound official and important. Human vessels. This is the Galactic Council. We are grateful for your response to our plea for help. Please dock carefully at Station Port 7. Co activated the ship's communication system. His voice was heard by every alien in the system. This is Captain Co of the human fleet. We got your message about pest control. Don't worry. Extermination is what we do best. The aliens did not know how to respond to that. They had expected gratitude and fear from a primitive species. Instead, they got confidence and what sounded like happiness from creatures who talked about destroying their greatest enemy like it was a simple job. The human ships docked at the station, but they did not shut down their weapons. Human crews walked through the station corridors wearing armor and carrying guns. They moved, like soldiers in enemy territory, because that is what they were. Soldiers. All of them. General Park So-young led the military meeting with the alien commanders. She was a small woman, but the aliens could feel danger coming from her like heat from a fire. She looked at their battle reports and tactical displays like a hunter studying tracks. The aliens tried to explain how hopeless the situation was. They showed her videos of the swarm destroying fleets and planets. They explained how the enemy learned from every battle and grew stronger. They talked about the billions who had died and the civilizations that were gone forever. Park listened to everything, and then asked questions that made the aliens uncomfortable. Do these machines feel pain? Can they be frightened? How do they react when their plans fail? Do they understand psychological warfare? Have you tried making them angry? The alien commanders looked at each other with confusion. These were not the questions of someone planning to defend. These were the questions of someone planning to attack. These were the questions of a predator. Colonel Choi Min-soo was studying the swarm's attack patterns on a holographic display. He was smiling. Sir, these machines are very good at adapting to logical tactics, but I don't see any evidence they know how to handle chaos. Park nodded. That was exactly what she had been thinking. The swarm expected their enemies to fight in organized, predictable ways. Every species in the galaxy fought with honor and tactics and careful planning. Humans had learned long ago that honor was a luxury you could not afford when you were trying to survive. Dr. Yoon So-jin, the fleet science officer, presented her analysis of swarm technology. It's impressive, but it has a weakness. The collective intelligence makes them efficient, but it also makes them predictable. They can't handle truly random behavior because their computers need patterns to analyze. Co stood up and addressed all the aliens in the room. You've been fighting these machines the wrong way. You've been trying to outthink them and out-technology them. That won't work. The only way to beat an enemy that learns from everything is to be completely unpredictable. Ambassador Kral's tentacles were shaking. But how can you fight without tactics or strategy? How can you win without careful planning? Quote's smile was not reassuring. Who said anything about winning? We're here to have fun. The aliens left the meeting more worried than when it started. They had asked for help from dangerous beings and gotten it. But now they were starting to understand that dangerous did not just mean powerful. Dangerous meant unpredictable. Dangerous meant creatures who thought war was entertainment. The human fleet began moving toward the front lines immediately. They did not wait for supplies or reinforcements or detailed intelligence reports. They went straight toward the enemy, because that was what humans did when they smelled a good fight. The Void Swarm was about to meet an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. They were about to learn that some species did not fight for survival or territory or resources. Some species fought because fighting was what they lived for.